Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining this month's Parent Education webinar hosted by the Lower Merion School District Interschool Council. Tonight, we're going to be discussing helping students navigate their differences through dialogue skills. A few housekeeping items before I introduce our speaker. We will have a presentation for about 35, 40 minutes, and then there'll be time at the end for questions. Feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go. If something comes up that Dr. Krueger says and you have a question that's burning, feel free to put it in the chat at any time and we'll ask it at the end, or you can wait until the Q&A at the end. Cicely Reese, who's here with me from the Interschool Council, will be facilitating the Q&A, so she'll be monitoring the chat. Also, we are recording this. So if you know people that were interested in attending and weren't able to join at this time, we will be posting a recording on the Interschool Council's YouTube page, and I will put a link to that in the chat later. So with that, we are pleased to be joined by Dr. David Krueger, who is the executive director of the Dialogue Institute at Temple University. Lower Merion School District has partnered with the Dialogue Institute to provide professional development for staff and to guide respectful discussions among students, especially related to issues of critical thinking and relationship building across differences in race, religion, and culture. You may have heard Superintendent Rinaldi speak about this at a few meetings where parents were in attendance. Dr. Krueger will present key strategies and approaches for fostering these skills. He'll share some insights about how to encourage open conversation, navigate differences, and foster empathy and understanding in everyday interactions. He will also give a little overview of the work that the Dialogue Institute is doing with the school district. A little bit about Dr. Krueger. He's a scholar, author, and educator with expertise in American religious history, religious pluralism, race, and ethnicity. He's a seasoned educator who has taught at several area colleges, universities, and community-based settings. He received a Master of Divinity from Palmer Theological Seminary. And also from the Princeton Theological Seminary, and a PhD in religious studies from Temple University. So we are very privileged and honored that he agreed to speak with us and present to parents of Lower Merion School District. So with that, I will pass it over to Dr. Krueger. Thank you so much. You were on mute. There you go.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's great to spend some time with you all this evening, and I look forward to sharing a few insights. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll jump right in. So we'll have a little bit of a workshop tonight on the practice and the skills of dialogue. It's something that we shared with administrators and educators in the Lower Merion School District. But let me tell you a little bit about our organization to give you a sense of context of who we are at the Dialogue Institute at Temple University. We focus on education and dialogue training, education on cultural, religious, and pluralistic principles to help develop leaders around the globe. We work with K through 12 educators. We work with college groups. We work with adult educators. We're based at Temple University. We grew out of the religion department at Temple University. But we also work at the University of Pennsylvania. We have contacts and programs we run there. We do programs in a few different school districts, and historically, we've also worked with a contract with the U.S. Department of State. And I'll tell you a little bit about some of these programs. One of which is a program that has really taught us a lot over the years and has really, I think, sharpened our ability to understand the need for dialogue and how to dialogue across incredible cultural differences. We worked with the young adult leaders who were brought to the U.S. Via the Department of State, and they come from a variety of countries, often the Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, other parts of the world as well. and we run 5 week long institutes on the topic of learning about the American religious landscape, learning about leadership, learning how to teach these young people to bridge differences. So we have, incredibly diverse cohorts of students that we work with: Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, secular, folks from all different types of backgrounds. And this experience of developing global leaders has really informed how we approach how we do dialogue in any setting, because there are all kinds of cultural, political, and religious differences no matter where you go. Um, One thing I also will mention too is a program that we're offering recently is a public history program. I think we're all aware that this is the great semi-quincentennial year, the America 250, the 250th anniversary of the birth of the U.S. And we just have launched a public history program and a public digital initiative of tracking the diversity and interesting stories uh, about the history of Philadelphia and its significance for thinking about America 250. So we work with school groups. I've got several groups coming up this week from around the country, actually, and we're giving walking tours to talk about the kind of the relationship between religion and democracy, how to talk about history in constructive ways. And we work with all kinds of school and college groups. And we invite you, if you have folks or student groups that would be interested and benefit from this type of an engagement. We actually do dialogue on the street. So we do dialogue wherever we go. And we think that history, it can be a really volatile subject. It can be really divisive. People have different perspectives on it. And it's really our specialty to really engage people in how to have a constructive conversations about the past and its relevance for life and our diverse democracy today. So that's a little bit about our organization, who we are, what we've done. Um, Before I jump into the kind of the dialogue skills training itself that we're going to do tonight, we were invited, if I remember correctly, it was maybe a year and a half ago or so, over to Lower Merion District. We were actually doing some work up in Bucks County, up in the Lansdale area previously, and then we were connected to the Lower Merion School District to do some conversation around some really tense conversations on campus around the Israel-Gaza war. And and that has been something that we discovered the last 3 years. There's been a number of settings where a variety of community groups, even a group of politicians we worked with in Harrisburg, having a lot of difficulty talking about how do we talk about Israel? How do we talk about Palestinian people? How do we talk about justice for all? How do we talk about fairness? How do we talk across just incredible differences? And we found that that issue has really been a dividing point in many areas. So we were invited about a year and a half ago, I think, to come to Lower Merion District to talk with teachers about how to create a safe space for conversation where we can have constructive conversations about really emotionally difficult topics. So we had my Muslim board chair, we had a Jewish leader from the Jewish Federation. I come out of the Christian tradition, and the three of us had a conversation around how to kind of navigate tricky questions around identity and digging into those types of topics. So my colleague and I, Dr. Andy Laudicio, we actually also came out to the school to talk with students. And one thing that we did in the session, we were talking about, well, okay, should we talk with the students right away about this issue of Israel Gaza? Should we come in and just do a facilitated discussion, just kind of jump in and start addressing the topic? And we felt that that wouldn't be the wisest way to begin. So what we did is we came out to our first session and did a session with students on just kind of the basics of dialogue, which is exactly what I'm going to share with you this evening. And we did a session on that. We got students, I think there was a group that was feeling really passionately about justice in Palestine. There's a group of students who felt passionately about justice for Israelis. And the students together, we talked about kind of the introduction to the basics of dialogue. We're able to do some good bridge building there, some trust, creating some trust, and we did not touch the topic at hand at all during that first session. So after the first session, after they got to know each other a little bit, then we moved into kind of tiptoeing into the topic at hand, so to speak. And we found that when we kind of established some rapport, some ground rules, some basic techniques and skills, we found that the conversation about the topic actually went better than I anticipated. And I just found that my experience of working with Lower Merion students was terrific. I found them to be extremely smart and engaged. And I think when the table was set in a way where people could feel like they were being heard, I really felt in my encounter with them that the students really did engage well with each other. And I felt the same way with teaching administrators and faculty as well. So I think I'm just really impressed by Lower Merion with everybody that I've met and been involved with. A lot of folks with a lot of hunger and curiosity to really bring their best selves into the classroom and into situations where we're talking about difficult topics. So thanks to you all. And I'd be happy to answer some more specific questions about that at the end. But let me just jump in and just share a few skills with you, just so you can kind of get a flavor of some of the things we talked about. Maybe these things could help you to engage in dialogue at home, because I have two young kids. I'm married as well, and we can apply these dialogue skills at home just as easily as we can in public and in school and in the workplace and faith communities or in civic groups. Dialogue is something that is can be applied wherever we go. So today we'll look at a couple of dialogue skills. We'll look at some techniques. We'll probably won't get a chance to practice. If you all want to have me come back, we can do something in person in the future, coming out to specific schools, and we can do something in person. I'd be happy to do that. But we'll just give you kind of a little bit of introduction tonight. So I'll skip past this because this is what we use for the district. Take a look at what we mean by dialogue. All right, so dialogue itself, let's get an understanding of what this word actually is and what it isn't. Um, Dialogue is a two-way communication between individuals for the purpose of learning from one another. Participants are open, honest, sincere, and describe themselves and are willing to describe themselves and come to learn. And I'm curious if you are able to use the chat. Could you do me a favor? Just put a word in the chat that would be the opposite of dialogue, rather than, an exchange of learning from one another, just from what you know so far about dialogue. What would be some words that would be the opposite of dialogue? Any suggestions? Let's see here. A one-way didactic. Okay, yeah. So giving a one-way teaching lesson, just kind of going out, or just giving a speech would be the opposite of dialogue. Listening to respond. I love that one. So the whole time you're in a conversation with somebody, you're just if I'm reading into what you're suggesting, but this sense of you're listening, but only listening enough so you can queue up and rehearse what you're going to fire back at them. Okay. Um, there's another D word that is really the opposite of dialogue. I'm wondering if anybody can come up with that. Starts with a D. How about DE? Disengaged. Okay. Well, that would be, that's another D word. Not the one I was looking for, but a sense of like being kind of disconnected, disengaged, not willing to participate, just kind of like laying back. Sure. Anybody ever participate in school on the like a debate team? Debate? Okay. So, what is the purpose of a debate? Debate is the point of trying to persuade the other, trying to get them to see it your way. Okay. So the chat looks like the chat function might not be working, but
Yeah,
that's
the chat was only letting people send messages to me, so I went ahead and fixed it.
oh,
So
okay.
looks like it's
Terrific.
working now. My apologies.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Okay, great. So, dialogue. What else can we say about dialogue? We can say that it is coming just to thinking at the Greek origin of the word. So it comes from the Greek word dia, which means together, and logos means thinking, as in logic. So if we look at this word and its kind of root meaning in the Greek language, it really means thinking together. Dialogue is something that is thinking together, not giving a speech, not giving a debate, not giving a didactic teaching, um, but something that's involved reciprocal exchange of thinking together. And this is our founder, Len Swidler, who he died a couple of months ago, but he was really known as the kind of the godfather of interreligious dialogue in particular, but speaks about dialogue in general. And he came up with these 10 principles, and I'm going to go through these 10 principles with you because I think they're really worthwhile to kind of soak it in because dialogue just doesn't come naturally to people. Dialogue really is a skill that has to be learned and cultivated. And our hope at the Dialogue Institute is that when we train dialogue, that it becomes a practice that becomes just kind of like a way that just it kind of permeates your being, like approaching any type of situation with a kind of a dialogical approach. So let me just go through a few of these terms here to kind of orient us to what we're talking about. So the first principle of dialogue is to approach an encounter with a person with whom you're having a disagreement, a person that you have a different political view, religious view, cultural way of doing things, some different kind of orientation to life, um, where there's some type of distinction or difference or conflict or something like that. So the first principle that we talk about in our dialogue principles is this to approach that encounter with a willingness to learn and to grow. Okay. To consider for a moment that there might be something that I can learn from this person that I don't know already. And, even to kind of lower the bar a little bit, if we can, even if you're suspicious about this notion of, can I really learn something from this person who holds this just terrible political view? Even if you're suspicious that you can actually learn something, but maybe you can at least learn how that person came to that political conclusion, or how did that person come to seeing the world in the way that they do. Um, Again, it's not forcing you to learn or to grow or to change in that way, but seeking a sense of understanding of the other person as part of the task of that encounter. Um, as frustrating as their opinion might be. So, number two, dialogue must be a two-sided project or conversation. It's kind of stating the obvious, right? But I've been to plenty of dialogue conversations that say it's a dialogue, but it's often, maybe the person in authority who's just kind of giving their opinion and then asking for maybe some exchange, but it's primarily an agenda driven by one person. Maybe it's the teacher or the parent or the boss or political official or something like that. But we need to make sure that if it's really dialogue, it's a two-sided thing where everybody has voice or multi-sided. I've also been in so many groups where, if it's 10 people, it's like two people that are speaking up, dominating the conversation, saying, their opinions on everything, and not allowing that space for the more introverted folks to be able to contribute something as well. So dialogue must create that space where everybody has a voice. Everybody can contribute in some way rather than just the extroverted, articulate, loudmouth people like me who always speak up all the time. Third, dialogue really relies on honesty and sincerity. What do I mean by that? Well, I often think about all the social media encounters that I have and that I'm sure that you all have had or observed, or if you see an article published in a newspaper or something like that, and then you read the comments or the comments on a Facebook post. And many of those comments in some settings are just kind of trollish comments, right? They're always there to provoke people getting upset. Um, for example, I saw there's a something about a new park being developed in Philadelphia, and the first few people were like, "Oh, we're really excited about this park," and then somebody chimes in and says, "Oh, just wait till all the drug addicts and the criminals show up and destroy it. Won't that be terrible?" Just people who just always have to like be throwing in some kind of a negative comment. Now, are I'm very suspicious, and I think it's true that sometimes a lot of those really negative comments that are thrown in are not by honest or sincere people. They're by people who are trolling. They're simply there to attract attention to their accounts. They're there to just to provoke people, to suck the energy, the life out of people's conversations. And that's not dialogue. So in my experience, I haven't had great dialogue experiences on a Facebook post. Um, there may be some of you who like to get into Facebook debates or arguments with relatives or that kid you went to high school with that you don't really like so much, but they made this political post and you just feel like you want to respond. I don't feel like social media spaces just are conducive to an environment of honesty and sincerity. I think there's so much performance, there's so much um, a lot of performance that happens in those settings. So being honest and sincere, and I'm just really have become biased since the pandemic has faded away that we need more face-to-face conversations in the same room, in the same space, maybe having a meal together. Um, it's just essential. Okay. Number four, comparing ideals with ideals, practices with practices, not practices to ideals. Okay, this is a little bit complicated. Let me just give you an illustration. Okay, I'll give you an illustration from interreligious dialogue because it's kind of the realm that I engage in a lot. I'll give you an example. Okay, let's say a Christian and a Muslim are having a conversation, and the Christian says to the Muslim individual, "Well, you know, Christianity is the religion of peace because Jesus said, 'Blessed are the peacemakers.' But what about that situation over there in that country where I saw Muslims committing violence over there? Um, that proves that Christianity is really the religion of peace." Okay, now hold on for a second. Now I'm going to flip it. Um, the Muslim person says to the Christian person, "Well, you know, Islam is at its core related to peace. Salam, Islam, or the kind of the root, the same root cognate. We're at our core, and when we assalamu alaikum is a sense of peace be upon you. It's peace at the core of everything in our faith. But you Christians, oh man, what about those crusades where you guys did that nasty stuff against Muslims in the Middle East during the crusades? Okay. All right. So what I'm illustrating here is that there's a sense of the Christian guy saying, talking about the ideals of their faith, and then criticizing the practices of somebody else's faith, and then flipped around. And you can apply it to a political situation as well. Well, the Democrats have these ideals about this religion, about this policy, um, but you Republicans are not kind to people or whatever. So what we want to do is when we're in a conversation with others, that we're comparing the ideals with ideals and practices with practices. So uh, Democrats and Republicans talking about like what are the ideals of your political values. When you're talking about religion, what are the ideals of your religion, and compare those rather than using your ideals to bludgeon somebody else's practices in the real world. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, number five. This is an important one. Speak for oneself, and I'll come back to the reflective listening later. Let me just freeze on the first part. Speak for oneself when you're in a dialogue. So, for example, um, I'm a white guy, in case you haven't noticed. Okay, so when I go into a multicultural setting, maybe I'm in the minority in that setting, um, or if I'm a Christian and I go into a multi-religious setting, maybe predominantly Muslim, Jewish, or whatever it might be. Um, I never feel like when I engage in dialogue that I need to speak on behalf of all white people or all Christians, because I can't do that. I am just like one person with rooted in my own experience, and I can only speak from my experience that is certainly informed by these larger cultural categories in which I'm embedded. So I think this takes so much pressure off of dialogue when we're in dialogue across cultural lines, that we don't have to represent our people group wherever we go. We can just be individuals and speak out of our own individual perspective. And there's no such thing as a Republican Democrat dialogue or a Christian Muslim dialogue. It's a person who might be a Christian and a person who might be a Muslim who are having a conversation as two embodied human beings. Okay, speak for yourself when you're in dialogue. Set aside preconceptions. Number six. I always challenge people to be prepared to be surprised when you encounter somebody else. I'll give you an example. I went out to uh, northern Idaho about a month ago to meet some of my relatives that I didn't know very well. And uh, prior to going there, I had seen some of their kind of social media posts, and I was like, okay, this is the political perspective they come from. This is kind of the religious perspective they come from. And I just assumed that, okay, all my encounters with this individual would probably be rather tense and we wouldn't find much common ground. And I just assumed we wouldn't ever agree. And then we got into a conversation. I won't get into the details of it, but it was a conversation about immigration. And I was assuming that this is the perspective that he was going to have on it. And I assumed that it would immediately, we would be disagreeing on absolutely every point. And to my shock, he had a much more similar view on immigration that I did. Totally blew me away from all the stereotypes that I had about that encounter. Uh, but I really wanted to push through my discomfort of engaging with him and actually try to put that issue on the table and just kind of see what happened. And I was really surprised by that. So I always challenge people, you just don't know exactly fully where people are coming from. Be willing to kind of like step in, try to understand is motivating people. Um, be prepared to be surprised. Number seven, establishing mutual trust. Level the playing field where possible. This is a tough one, but it's so essential. Um, do what you can to establish a trusting level of engagement because, I've been in many settings where people just kind of freeze up and they're scared to say something that might offend the other person, something that might be not politically correct or viewed as the mainstream correct view. But I really try to cultivate in any dialogue experience a sense of safety. Like, look, don't be afraid of making a mistake, of tripping up, saying something that might offend me. Like, it's okay. We can um, make that attempt in a dialogue conversation and don't be so concerned about hurting other people's feelings. If we do hurt somebody's feelings, we can scale it back. We can try to apologize where needed, but create an environment where we can take risks is really important as well. Eight, learn from, not focus on teaching one another. Um, reiterating number one. Number nine, be willing to critique one's own, I will say, religious tradition, cultural tradition, political tradition. I think that if we can demonstrate some sense of humility about our own position, it opens up and invites others to also express humility as well. I think humility can be contagious, not in all situations, but I often take a risk and put that out there, critique my own perspective, and I've often had good results. And then lastly, the 10th principle is just to practice empathy. Just do our best to be kind to one another in these exchanges. We just need more of that. Um, Recognizing that we may, offend somebody, we may trip up, but just do the best we can to approach one another with kindness. So these are kind of the overview of the key principles that I think are valuable. Um, Kind of boiling them down is something that I think is helpful, and working through humility, a willingness to learn. And I know that you were kind of talking about tonight. You were thinking about like can this apply to kids in particular, to teenagers? Um, and I just remember myself as a teenager, especially in high school, like I had such a deep sense of certitude about the world, of knowing like this is the correct religious view, this is the correct political view. And I had a really hard time with humility. Um, During that teenage phase years. It's not the problem of every teenager, but I think it can be common. And it was something that I really felt was really important. So cultivating humility, willingness to learn, and cultivating the sense of empathy as well. And here's a phrase that I think just kind of ties this together about the reason for why we actually need dialogue. Our founder had this really cool quote. He said, "Nobody knows everything about anything. Therefore, we need one another. We need to engage in dialogue to find out what it is that we don't yet know." Um, I just think that's a good framing way to approach the world. We need each other because our view of the world, our view of our of political positions, our view of religion is incomplete unless we can be willing to engage with others. And we may find that when we engage with others, we may enrich our own position or strengthen our own position. Um, what else can we say? Dialogue across cultural, political, or other differences does not require us to all agree or to declare that all views are equally valid. Rather, to learn and grow within relationships and learn differences about another worldview. So this is a critique that I often get um, by a number of different groups, and sometimes, especially when I work with religious groups or even groups that are really deeply committed to their political way of seeing the world. Um, some people say, like, look, I don't want to engage in dialogue with others because I really know the way that the world is. Um, I have the best understanding of the world. Why would I want to waste my time talking with somebody who has this just awful position, this awful political way of voting? Why would I want to engage with them? So I really, I frame it with this commitment that dialogue does not mean that we have to give up our faith, give up our political viewpoints, give up our deepest and cherished beliefs. It does not mean we need to give them up. Okay. It simply means that we're willing to enter into a conversation and to continue in relationships with people from differing views and differing backgrounds. It's just really, really key. And I find this to be really, really reassuring to a lot of people that it's not a requirement that you have to change your mind. You might change your mind, which could be kind of cool, but that's not the expectation. To succeed in dialogue does not mean that you sacrifice your cherished beliefs, but simply to remain in relationship with others who have different views than you. Um, I'm sure some of you have conflicts in your own family, hopefully political conflicts and cultural differences of opinion don't tear families apart. It can tear families apart. Um, but going back to my experience of my relatives out in Idaho, I really found that applying these skills of dialogue was really essential for me to keep my sanity in that moment, but to also to stay, in contact with, in connection with some family members that I really did want to retain a relationship with. So dialogue has applications in a variety of settings. So what else can we talk about tonight in our short amount of time? This is something that I also shared with your teachers as well, is this very basic skill of the intent versus impact. This is so, so important when we're engaged in dialogue and conversation with somebody else. Um, And so many times, where I might enter into a conversation setting where I say something to the person I'm talking with, and that person gets really, really offended by what I said. And then I'm scratching my head thinking like, what the heck is the matter with you? Why are you mad because of what I said? I was trying to say this, but you're hearing something else. So what we need to do is to be able to think in terms of there's a distinction between we may have the best of possible intentions to say what we think is the right thing in a certain situation, but sometimes we find that the way that we're intending it to come out is not the way that it is heard by the person receiving it, or something that we said may have hurt their feelings, even if we were intending to compliment them in some way. So here's an example my colleague developed. A teacher tells a student that this test wasn't their best work when the student received a lower score than usual on the exam. Okay. And while the teacher's intention was to motivate the student to work at their full potential, the student in this scenario felt embarrassed and defeated. Okay. So the teacher was trying to say, like, you could almost hear the internal logic of the teacher saying, like, because I think you're a smart student, because I know you have such capacity and such possibility, I expected you to receive a higher score than you did. So, you could see like that wasn't an attack on the student. It was a sense of the teacher was affirming that in that way, but the student heard it in such a way that it felt like a critique of them in that situation. So thinking very carefully, and I bet you could come up with some examples from your own family life or situation where you intended to say one thing, but it landed in a totally um, different way. So I'll put that on the table. And let's see, what else can we say? There's some other ground rules that we have for dialogue, and I'm going to wrap it up pretty soon here because I just wanted to see if there are anything that resonated with you so far. We're at 7:45 now, and we're going to wrap up after not too long. Um, Reiterating some of the points of dialogue: respecting all voices, listening actively without interrupting, um, speak from your personal experience. Number three, I think is important: challenge people's ideas, not challenging people. Um, Maintaining confidentiality in dialogue is another way to build trust. Um, Obviously, no hate speech, no discrimination, stay curious. And the last thing I wanted to share is this little technique here called the air technique. This is the last thing I wanted to just to share with you briefly. Um, I did this, I spent a lot of time with this with your teachers at Lower Merion. And it's a method called the air technique. Where we engage in conversation in such a way that we ask questions. So if somebody is making a statement, and let's say it's something that really um, offends you, or I'll give you the example here of my colleague came up with this idea of a dialogue partner number one has spoken. Dialogue partner two asks a question showing they would like to learn more about what their partner means. So the person says something that is controversial, um, saying something to the effect of, I think that women are bad at math. Okay. And that was the controversial statement that was put out on the table. And then the person in conversation with them says, okay, I hear you to be saying that you think that women are bad at math. Can you explain what you mean by that? Okay. So it's a sense of like, okay, I want to make sure I heard what you're saying. Can you explain more about what you're actually saying? So it's an appreciative inquiry of like, can you please clarify what you're getting at? Okay. Then there's the next statement that we go to. The response could be, it's an I using an I statement of I understand, or I've had a similar experience, or I've had a different experience. So you can respond. Here's an example of, well, personally, I know many women who are good at math, and in fact, I am good at math. Okay. So you approach them not with a sense of you're an idiot because you think that women are not good at math. It's a sense of kind of disarming the situation and saying, well, in my experience, that is not the case because I know lots of women are good at math. So you can disarm the situation and de-escalate the situation by, rather than attacking the person directly, you can make an I statement as a way to kind of more safely engage. And then reflective listening is the ability to reflect what the dialogue partner is saying in a way that makes them feel heard. It's kind of a way to check out the process to make sure that both you and the speaker understand what is being said. Um, so you can use these reflective statements such as, so you feel this way about this topic, or it sounds like you, or for you, it's like this. Okay. And again, it's not directly like attacking the person. It's not directly confronting the person. And not to say that there aren't situations where you need to confront, but these are just some basic tools of continuing the conversation rather than shutting it down. So asking questions to clarify, using I statements, and then reflecting back what you've heard are some techniques. So I think that's really more than enough. And we've only got about 11 minutes left. And I wanted to just see if you had any thoughts or questions about any of these techniques. Again, to be willing to come out and share in a deeper way, uh, if you'd like to learn more about some of these techniques, and be happy to answer a little bit more about what we did at Lower Merion. So really, the floor is open.
Thank you so much for this awesome presentation and framework and really talking about the why, right? The why behind the Dialogue Institute and the necessity to um, help teachers, but really people in general, facilitate better conversations. We do have one question, and that's really, is there an email address where, if someone wants to provide a comment or feedback, is there an email address that you can be reached
Yes,
at?
I'm going to put that in the chat right now. It's info@dialogueinstitute.org.
Oh,
And
thank you.
if any of you would like to join our mailing list as well, I'll put that in the chat, and you can follow the different K through 12 programs that we do. We also do tours, public history, other types of dialogue training and programs, and you're welcome to check that out as well. And I'll just
So you mentioned the tours in the beginning of the conversation, and are they only open to groups? So if a family or if an individual wants to go on a tour, how would they get in touch with the Dialogue Institute?
They can sure do that. Also put our tours program link in the website.
Okay,
This is at
thank
our
you.
Religious Freedom Trails. Either one of these websites, you can find out about our tours. But yes, what we'll do is groups are a little bit easier for us to organize. But if there are individuals, we can collect groups of individuals and say like on this date, we'll try to we'll kind of channel some folks together. So absolutely, reach out to us as individuals, and we'll get you on the list. And as soon as we have a kind of a public group open, we'd love to include you. Bring young people as well. I'm actually this Thursday I'm giving tours to some seventh graders from Hoboken, New Jersey. But we have groups that come from all over the country, high school, middle school, and adults of all ages.
That is awesome. So I do see a question, and the question is around combating misinformation. And I don't know if Kara would like to come off and off of mute and
Cicely, there
ask
was
anything
actually
directly. Oh, hold on.
earlier context to her question. She said,
Oh,
what
okay.
advice are you giving to, it's okay. What advice are you giving to our students and staff when someone presents an opinion that is not based on facts? I keep hearing this from students. They feel like a deer caught in headlights and they freeze. And to Cicely's point, she clarified later that that's about kind of combating misinformation.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we I think we did a little bit of work on media literacy and helping at least with the students that we do in our other programs. We talk a lot about like media literacy, how to discern what's a good source, that type of thing. I think your teachers probably already do that type of training in schools, that type of thing. Um, yeah, I mean, when it comes to dialogue as well, like I think. It can be so fruitless to engage with people who are trafficking in misinformation. So let's just make a distinction between misinformation and disinformation. Okay, misinformation can be, you may be making a statement or making a claim, assuming yourself that it is the truth, like this is reality. And you may not be aware that this is based on something that is not true. So it's kind of like the intention is to communicate something truthful, but you may be communicating unwittingly something that is not truthful. Um, Also, what we see on social media engagement is strictly disinformation, where there's intentional distortion. And trafficking information that is destructive, that is not true with certain political agendas. And yeah, as far as engaging as how dialogue fits in with that, I mean, you know, learning how to be discerning about what is misinformation, what is disinformation. I feel like my kids, they go to Philadelphia public schools and they've become pretty savvy in what they've learned and they seem to be, to be acquiring those skills. So I'd have to defer to what your teachers are doing with the misinformation. And the other part of the question is if you prefer to ask the question anonymously. Oh, sorry. Okay. I don't know if there's a follow-up or if I'm answering it the way that you were hoping that I would answer it. If there's something else I can add, I'd be happy to elaborate.
Can I unmute? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can
Yes.
hear you.
Thank you for answering, and I think your clarification about misinformation and disinformation is an important one. But something that we see, um, I think there's a lot of parents on here that are volunteers and connected with the schools and the district more than some others, is a mixture of misinformation and disinformation. So I was just wondering what our district-wide partnership with the Dialogue Institute, how that's translating to putting those kinds of tools in both our students' toolbox and our teachers' toolbox, um, about how do you have a dialogue, a respectful dialogue with someone who's starting from a different truth than yourself. And that is what I keep hearing. And it's not always personal hearing feedback, but what you said on social media with people going back and forth, people don't know how to do that. And I think that's a really big question that people are looking for guidance on.
Yeah, and it's so, so tough too, is that a sense of like, well, I might say that somebody's political opinion on this topic is misinformation. And I might say like, objectively, I think that I would say that as misinformation. But even when I'm declaring something misinformation using the best research and understanding that I have, there may be something that I may be missing about the topic that I may not be aware of. I may have a blind spot, even though I'm a professional in my certain areas, that I realize I may have a blind spot as well. So, and I don't want to say like, um, every claim is equally valid. I'm not saying that as well. There are some things that can be proven. There are some things that can be disproven, 100%. We should stand with that. But there are also some issues that are a little bit more gray areas. So if we're saying like if somebody is saying, well, that's misinformation to be saying that that religion is better than that. I mean, those are more like subjective kinds of claims. So I sometimes I hear the term misinformation applied to too many settings because it's simply a matter of kind of subjective claims that may be in conflict. Um, so I guess the best way to navigate through some people are so convinced of something that may not be true that we still have to somehow find a way to engage, keep that person in conversation. Because I found out that even when you're confronting people who may be following a conspiracy theory or something like that, if you just automatically engage uh, to argue against them, to shut them down, they freeze up and they lose the ability to be open to another possibility because they feel attacked and they feel like okay, well, you're just confirming my position because I have this enlightened view, and there's only a small group of elite people who actually really understand things as the way that they are. Um, so somehow engaging with that person in such a way of how did you come to that conclusion? Even if you know it's a misinformation, can you tell me how you got to that point? Can you tell me why this statement on this claim on this topic is important for you to make. Why is this important to you to make this claim? So hopefully, I'm sorry, I'm being a little rambly here, but I think it's really, really important to somehow find a way that even if somebody is kind of like captured by misinformation in some way, that you can still find some techniques and skills to keep them in the conversation rather than to have them shut down.
I think that example was really helpful. Thank you. And I'm also looking at it from the flip side of the coin, which
Mhm.
is from the student perspective.
Uh-huh.
When a student wants to engage in dialogue with another student with a differing opinion, but they feel that that student's opinion is based on different facts, like they're starting just from a basic truth that's different.
Yeah.
Um, they don't want to start the dialogue by calling them a liar. That's what it feels like to them. So they
Mm.
don't, so they don't participate. They freeze, and
Yeah.
then the opposing viewpoint says, like there's a winner and a loser. So the opposing viewpoint is like, you're not participating in the dialogue because you know I'm right. And then that student walks away feeling unheard and just not satisfied with the quote dialogue. So thank you
Exactly. Thank
for
you.
the advice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krueger. I think that is it for time. So, want to thank the Interschool Council for hosting this. Dr. Krueger, thank you very much for informing us about these strategies and the work that you're doing with the school district. I think it's great that the school district invited you guys in to be working on this at the school level and at the classroom level. And thank you all for joining. As I mentioned at the beginning, we did record this and it will be posted on the Interschool Council's YouTube page. I will be posting it on the Lower Marion School District the parent action group on Facebook. We will also post a link to it on the Interschool Council's Facebook page. So feel free to share those links widely for people who are interested and not able to join. Cicely, do you have anything else before we wrap up? All right. Thank
Nope,
you
I
so
think
much,
I'm good.
everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.